It's been extremely exciting to be at the museum to show my work there, and I'm really looking forward to this interview. So I'm a Colombian and New Yorker artist. By now, I'm almost half half. I grew up in Colombia, and I moved here about 20 years ago. I did my school in Colombia. I studied graphic design and illustration. So for the first 14 years that I lived in New York, I worked as a graphic designer and illustrator. And through my artwork, I landed to illustration, but also that through illustration was the way that I decided to focus fully on my practice as a visual artist. So this is basically what has brought me to where I'm at right now, and I'm very I love it. There's I would say that all through my life there's a lot of things that inspire my practice, but I would say that there's perhaps two chunks of my life that are um, very important in this process. One of them was when I was young. There was a change in schools, and the school that we joined, my dad became very close friends to a family, and the father of that family used to do these incredible trips around Colombia, camping trips. So we started doing it with them. And one of the things that he would do was open a map of the country and then close his eyes and drop his finger. And wherever his finger will drop, that's where we would go. So we would jump in the car. We would all have, it would be a caravan of cars with gas, because we would go to places where there was not even gas stations. We would sleep in the road, and that was extremely, like, I had an incredible time. I would learn about the bugs, the animals, the plants. That was one of the amazing moments, because later on, a few years later, um, that was not something that you could do, which was like travel around the country and sleep in the road. It was not something that was able. And then the second trip that marked me again was after before coming to the States. We took a trip to with my father to the rainforest in the Pacific coast, to a place called La Ensenada de Utria. It's a very, it's like a very thin, long bay, and whales come to give birth to their baby whales. I don't know what's the name for it. And when we were going over, we flew over the rainforest, and I could see over the canopy the holes of gold mining, and that just stayed in my head very strongly. So those are some of the most forming and inspiring trips that I had, that took me to start doing the work that I'm doing. A lot of the passion comes from having had access, and those childhood memories. It comes from also my dad. He reforested the land of the house where he lives now. And seeing all of these things have inspired me to just talk about them, especially when I came to the States, and the only reference to Colombia were with drug cartels and violence and kidnapping. So that just was something that made me just rethink how people were seeing my country, and started to talk about actually all the incredible experiences that I had, and the importance of these landscapes that exist in other parts of the world, and how important those are to keep balance in our environment. But also, which I think that we are responsible no matter where we live. There's a level of responsibility as people that live in this earth to be aware of our impact in the environment and in our landscapes. I use two constant elements, which is color, gold, and the use of gold and the black and white. And those are the most direct conversations to the problem. The gold not only represents the wealth of the land, but it also represents the impact of extractive economies over the land, and how these extractive economies just are taking and taking from the land and not replenishing and not giving back to the land. And that's one of it creates an extreme imbalance. And then the black and white speaks about, initially was, I used it as to create a link between when the settlers were coming to South America or the Americas, and they were discovering all these new like exotic landscapes, and the link between that and deforestation and climate impact right now. But also to speak about how eventually we would see these landscapes as something that existed in the past. And also the black and white, it also makes reference to, oil spill, the burning of a forest, those are impacts that these extractive economies have, and they most of the times are black. So I use that. But also with black and white, the more that I use it, the more it becomes clear that it's the color scheme that I need to be using, because it questions people why they're seeing a representation of nature without color. And that starts conversations. That's a really good conversation started. And I think that a lot of the work, one of the main things that it's important is that it needs to have conversations started. And through those conversations is that we can create a difference and make an impact. If that's what the artist is about and what they want to do, and that's the kind of work they want to do, yes, they have, that's part of what they are out in the world to do. But I don't think that every artist needs to be doing the same thing or having the same conversations. And I think that the beautiful part of being an artist is that you get to choose what you feel that is the best practice for you, and what is the best way of communicating and having conversations with different people. So I think that it just depends on the artist. But yeah, if the artist wants to have that position, a political and activism position, then it's super important. Because my background was as a graphic designer, I was working digitally, and that's a lot of how my process has been, my technique has been stemming from. So initially when I started doing collage of old botanical plates. And then eventually I started moving into finding photography and using photography that I could use as representation, like that I could draw inspiration from to create my pieces. And then that eventually, when I started focusing more on my practice, I started doing artist residencies, which those artist residencies um, were happening in places that will give me access to nature. And that's where I really developed the process that I have right now. And that process consists in very extensive documentation through photography about the subjects that I'm drawing. Those, by subjects, I mean trees, plants, um, animals that I find when I'm visiting. Then at the same time, I'm collecting plants that then I press, and collecting seeds and branches and all different things that I find in the spaces where I'm at. That then those I use to create textures and brushes that I can use. A lot of the times I also end up collecting soil and using soil as pigment or paint, or even fruits or fruits that I find that could be used to create those pigments. And I do drawings with all of those. I do a lot of textures and just simple line drawings that then I scan and compose digitally. And once I have the composition and the final piece created digitally, I print that on canvas and then I paint over that. It was incredible. It was a lot of fun. The conversations with the kids were amazing. It also reinforced this idea that kids are extremely aware, extremely perceptive, that they have really good observation skills. So we played a game of trying to find all the animals that were in the pieces, which they found immediately. So then I moved forward. I moved on to ask them to find some of the press plants that I had around and see them reflected in the pieces, because a lot of these plants I have scanned and then used throughout the artwork. And they also found them extremely fast. So I don't know, it was incredible. It was incredible to see how perceptive and how interested they were into discovering all of these things within the artwork. I think that he was one of the biggest driving factors for me to go back into my practice and to speak about what I want to speak, not only because I want him to have a future on planet Earth and planet Earth to be well, but also because I started noticing how connected and how perceptive he was around nature. Even just by walking in the urban streets of Brooklyn, he will find a cricket right there in the sidewalk. And one of the things that I would love for people to experience is being able to have that connection to nature and be able to approach nature very close and get very, very close and be able to observe all these wonderful relationships that are within nature, those connections that are already inherited in nature. And so with my pieces, I kind of want people to be able to feel that they can get that close and that there's no reason to be scared. Kids are the future. Kids can teach their parents immensely. And as parents, we can learn so much from our children. I've learned so much. I know that I've learned so much from Joaquin. And as we learn from our children, we can help. We can start making a difference in our world and try to build a better world for these little creatures that are going to be living in it later on. We can learn from them and help them prepare to have an incredible place to live. Thank you so much. It was great.